what we're going to do now is we're going to build a simple name key, an animated lower third, as it's sometimes called, in Premiere that has some animation to it, okay? So even though this may not be the first thing you think of when you think of doing something fancy, the reality is with a lot of corporate work especially, sort of defining a look and feel to the way that your names come on and off is actually kind of a cool thing to do. So if you look at my screen now, we are going to build something that looks something like this. Not super fancy, but this is our first exercise, okay? But we basically have a name coming on, some lines coming into place, another little pink box that falls down from the top, pretty simple little movement of several items, all right? So what we could have done is just built this name key and just fade it on and off, right? There's my name, it gets identified, life is good. But the animated version, surely to you, is much more interesting, right? To have all these things sort of come on. So what do I actually have happening here? Well, you can turn off different tracks in Premiere and look at things as they unfold in the different stages. So my first layer was the version that I made of my name with everything in it. Okay, then I copied it to the next track and I eliminated everything but the blue bar. Okay, so I'm turning off the layer that was everything all built together and showing you that I copied it several times up in the timeline and then broke it into its ingredients. So the first one is the blue bar. The next one is the little pink bar, which also has some animation to it that drops down and lands in a specific spot. Okay, then the next one again was all the layers, only I turned off everything except for the white line. So now I've got a white line that both fades in and slides over. All right, the next one is my name, which doesn't do anything fancy, it just sort of comes on. And then lastly, we have my title, which wipes on to reveal with a little bit of drama the edit guru facetious title that I have. All right, so how did I do that? All right, so first, of course, we have to import in some footage. We're going to basically create a bin called clips. I would create a project, if I didn't already tell you to do it, called nonlinear examples. Probably a good place to start so that you can see how these are done and reference them sometime in the future. So if you're not already in a Premiere project called nonlinear examples, do that. And then once you get into that project, then we will go and we will create a bin called clips, and we're going to import in a clip as our background. So once you have a bin called clips, which again you can right click and do new bin, or you can do file new bin. I already have bins here, but that's how you start a new one. And once you know you're in the clips bin, which if you double click should make it where you're actually parked, then you can import in right from there and go find the clip. Now the clip is called Times Square, and you will find it in set 1 of the media for this class, which is online as well. Set 1, and it is loose in that first layer of folder set 1 Times Square. It's right there. All right, you can import it in and put it into a timeline. However, we need to create a timeline, right? We got to create a sequence. We don't want to just arbitrarily drag it in there because we don't know what it's going to build. So we're going to create a bin for sequences. All right, so do new bin and then sequences, file new bin, sequences. Once you've done that and then you double click into it, it'll be empty. Mine are not, but you're going to say I want to create a new sequence. So let's go to settings. We don't care about these presets because they're wrong. We're going to go to settings. We are not editing in DV. We are doing something custom, so we're going to go to custom. We are using 2997. That's totally fine. We do not want our frame size to be 720. We're going to do 1920, 1080. 1920, the big number goes first, right? Then 1080, not 1880. Come on. And then when I click off to nothing, it says, oh, but the proportions are not 16 by 9, it's 160 by 99. Well, what did I forget to do? We need to set our pixel aspect ratio to 1. 1-to-1 ratio, boom, gives you a 16 by 9 size when you say that it is that big. We don't want interlace, this lower fields and upper fields. We don't care about that. We want progressive, nice, full, solid frames. 2997 is fine. We could leave it frame only MPEG, but I'm not a big MPEG fan, so I go to the QuickTime collection of codecs. And once I select that, I can go into the codec and actually have access to ProRes 422, which is awesome. And before I actually name my sequence, I can go save preset, yes please, and create one that's called ProRes 1920 x 1080, and then maybe 29.97, right? These are like the big numbers we chose when we made the sequence. A square pixel aspect ratio is sort of the default for all modern things, so we could put that there too. We could also just describe it if we wanted to not have as long of a title. So you could type in anything you want to remind yourself in here. Use this for things like XYZ, whatever. Once I have that preset, it will show up on the main page in the custom section. It will show up right here, okay? But I still need to name my sequence, so I would name my sequence something, and in this case I'm going to use the one I already named called demo, and here it is. Alright, so you finished naming your sequence, hopefully set to the right thing. It's down here. We're going to go get that Times Square shot, so maybe you go back to Project tab, maybe use the caret to open your two bins so you can see both your imported clip and the sequence and any titles that we're going to make, because we are going to make some titles. I got a bunch down here. But we'll get to that. So I say yep with my sequence loaded, which was the demo one. I want, and I'm going to do it just to show you. I'm going to grab the clip and I'm going to drag it in and I'm going to drag it down here. Yay team. Now it asks the fatal question. Hey, the clip does not match the sequence settings. Do you want to change the sequence to match the clip? The answer is no. We just went way out of our way to make sure that we have it set to ProRes, to 1920, 1080, etc., etc. Now, I knew this footage would fit in it because I already knew this footage, but if I didn't know this footage, we would have done the whole, let's go right-click on the shot and get the properties of the clip and make sure we know what the frame rate is, etc., etc. But we didn't have to do that. In the interest of time, we skipped it. However, we went out of our way to set the sequence a certain way. We know it's not exactly like the footage because we don't want it to be exactly like the footage. Right? So we're going to say, no, please keep my settings. Don't try to help me. I know what I'm doing. I'm a professional now. All right, so we're going to create a new title. All right? We need to create a title that is essentially the completed version of my animated name key. All right? So if I load the one I already made, you can look and see what I did. I had kind of a blue thing. I had a pink bar. I had a line, my name all in caps, but thicker and then thinner for the description. Great. That's what we're going to build. So how do we build a title? We make sure we have a bin to put it in. So I have one called titles. I double click it. Here's all the titles I made, but I'll make a new one to go with this example. All right, so make a bin, right click, new bin, titles. Okay, then go File, New, and we're going to do a legacy title. There is sort of a shortcut to make titles now, but I'm going to tell you it's better to sort of work this way, especially as a newbie, to sort of think about what you're building, and this forces you to do it in kind of an old school way. All right? So it's saying, okay, I'm going to make a title, and I'm going to make it based on the frame rate you have this timeline set for. Now, in this case, I actually did set mine to 23.976. I think I just told you to leave it 2997. Doesn't matter. The point is it's going to base it on the timeline you have open right now, the sequence you have open right now. Okay, mine just happens to be set differently, but don't worry about it. Okay, I'm going to call this full title. All right, and I hit OK, and then my title window comes up. Okay, basic graphic design sort of choices in your title, and you can grab the boundaries of everything and you can make more room for what it is you're trying to see. So you got all your tools sort of in the top left. You've got some alignment controls. You've got some other centering controls and things like that. And then you've got all those sort of artsy choices over here where you can fill with different colors and make stroke lines and backgrounds and shadows and things like that. Yay, team. These are all things we very much may care about here in just a minute. All right, I'm going to draw a rectangle. Okay, I'm going to choose the little rectangle tool. I'm going to draw a box. And I'm going to go like that. And then I'm going to change the color of it. It's defaulting to white, so I can go here and I can select a color using the eyedropper, which is kind of cool. Maybe I like the blue on this sign. It works for me. All right, and then we say, okay, I think I had a pink box on there as well. Right now the box is highlighted. Any colors I try to change is going to change it for my blue box. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to make a new box. And with this one highlighted, I can say, all right, let's do pink. Why did I do pink? Well, because I stole it from this sign right here, I think. There we go. All right, so now I've got this little box here that sort of crosses the line, which is kind of nice. I can make it a little narrower, right? And then I can type my name. Yeah, that's the font I want, right? Not at all. Let's change our font to something a little more professional. Let's do Avenir. Avenir's nice. And it's set to light by default. We're going to change it to thick. And I don't think I want it pink. Let's change it to white. Alright, so there's the name. If it's a little too big, I can get in and change the font size a smidge. Yeah, that looks a little better. Alright, and then I'm going to base my title on the same graphic, so I can copy, paste. Now there should be two. And I can actually say, alright, this one I do want thin. So I'm going to go with light. And I'm going to change it to read. Something goofy. And I'm going to put this down here. And I think the only thing I'm missing now is my line. So we're going to go to the line tool. And a white line is perfectly fine. I want it approximately this long. If I want to make it perfectly straight, I can start drawing it and then hold down Shift and it will force it to be a perfectly straight line. So maybe I want this line to not quite touch the end. That works for me. I can go here and drag it into place, and there's my title. Now I can close this title just by closing the window. It saves it, and I can drag it down into my timeline, put it on the track above, and it will be there. And I can put a dissolve on it by right-clicking and doing apply transition, right? And I can say, cool, now it fades up. Isn't that a professional name key? Not bad. But we could make it do more than that, which is what we're going to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this title. Now, it's called full title here. If I right click and I say copy, and then I paste it, you'll notice that the version I pasted is still called full title. And there's still only one actual title that's been created over in my bin. This can totally screw you up because you think you just made a duplicate, which means you can open this one and change it. If you change anything in here, it will change it on the original as well, which is not what you set out to do, right? We want to actually trick it out. We want to be based on that, but we want to do different things to it. So what I need to do is not do copy and paste. I can hold down Option on the keyboard, drag my clip over or to the right, and it will make a copy. And the cue is you got to see the word copy in there, or it didn't actually copy it. It just made sort of another occurrence of the same graphic, which means anything that happens to one will happen to them all. And that's not what you want. So on this copy, we're going to double click it. It's going to open that tool, and we're going to say, okay, this layer that I'm building, I don't want it to have anything but the blue bar. So I'm going to click on all the stuff that's not a blue bar, and I'm done. Right? So this layer right now is my blue bar, which is pretty cool. All right. Then I'm going to go back to the original one, and I'm going to dupe it again. Hold down Option, drag it up. It's going to make another copy, and it's identical. It's got the fade on it and everything I don't need. I can actually, because it could get confusing, I can actually not look at the first version of it. It'll still be there, but at least it won't show up in my stack as I start building. All right, and I'm going to go into this one, and I'm going to say, all right, what's the next thing that I'm going to want to animate? In this case, I would say, oh, let's make it the pink. So the blue bar can go away, the text can go away. The blue bar can't go away because it's actually on the track below. Notice I can't highlight it. It's because it's not really on this track. The only thing left on this version is the pink box. So I close it, and if I turn off the track below, you'll see it's just the pink box, okay? So it's easy to get confused. You got to sort of be aware of what you have on and what you don't. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to do it again, right? Because we have more things to animate. Take the dissolve off. And what should the next one be? Probably my name. Let's do my name. So I'm going to open it. And I'm going to nuke all the elements off of it except for my name. All right. And the only thing that should give me a ghost around it when I mouse over it should be my name, because that's the only thing I didn't delete. And when I close this, cool, and if I wanted to, I could turn off just my name now. And then we're going to do it again. We're going to do my title and then the line, right? So each one. So my title, open it, lose everything but my title. Careful not to bump it because you could really confuse yourself, right? Okay, the only thing that's ghosting is the title, so it must be good. I can confirm it up here. Yep, it's the only thing going on and off. And then lastly is the white line. So I'm going to hold down Option, go up there. There it is. Remove my shadow or my dissolve. And lastly is the white line. So I'm going to nuke everything that's not a white line. And it should go back and it should now be its own thing. Yep, so now I can selectively turn on or off whatever I want. All right, which means I can now do something to each of those layers independent from one another. So let's start from the bottom up. So we're not confused. What do we want the blue line to do? Well, to me, the blue line could probably just wipe on. That to me is probably the easiest thing. So we need the crop effect. We got to add that to this track. So I'm going to go to the effects tab that I left open. If you didn't know it, leave it open. You can go to Window and Effects, and it will still take you to it either way, which is great. And I'm going to search for the word crop. Here's crop. Go down, throw it on the blue line. And then, in order to control that effect, I have to go to Effects Controls, which is mostly, usually by default, located right here behind your source window, which we're not really using anymore. So this is kind of a nice place for it. If I want to see more, I can actually drag it over and actually get a little better view of what all I have control over and the little timeline for keyframing it. So if I go to this layer, the blue, and I go to the crop effect, which got added down here. There was no crop effect, except I dragged it onto the item and it added it to this list. So I can uncollapse it if it isn't already opened. And I can say, all right, I want the right-hand side, which I can get a little slider for by opening the caret. I want the right-hand side to sort of wipe on. So I have to set two keyframes. Where is the line when it starts and where is the line when it ends? So I'm going to go to the beginning of when the blue line isn't visible at all, and I'm going to go to the beginning of the clip, the very beginning of the clip, and I'm going to mark a keyframe. And anytime you mark your first keyframe, you have to use the stopwatch button. Once you click that, it sets a keyframe, and then from that point on, you can set new keyframes with this button. But the first one is always the stop sign, or little stopwatch. All right, so let's say I don't need it animating the whole time it's up. I just need it animating over the first minute or so, right? Or, I'm sorry, second or so. So it starts at about 8 frames in. So if we go to 108, we know that'll be about a second for it to take to wipe on. So that's pretty good. I like nice round numbers. We can always stagger the animation time later. And I need to set a new keyframe. So I set a new keyframe, but right now it's still at the setting that the first one was, meaning we don't see the blue line at all. So I actually have to move this now. Now that I have a way to remember the movement, because there's a keyframe in there, I'm going to wipe it to where it is completely on. And by about there, it's done. All right, so now I can literally test it by dragging back, and you'll see that as it goes from keyframe 1 to keyframe 2, it is good. And since there's no other keyframes, it stays like that the rest of the time, which is pretty great. Now, I could also say, you know what? I don't like it being totally solid. I want this to be a little transparent. I can set keyframes for transparency, or I could just flat out say, no, I don't need it to animate the opacity. I just want it to be a little less. So anytime there's a caret, you can open it and that'll give you a slider. But if you don't want to, you can click on the number, and you'll notice that if you click and hold too long, it thinks you want to type a number. But if you click quickly and start dragging, it will actually give you the ability to drag the amount. And sometimes it will let you drag beyond what the slider that it gave you. If I did this, it'll go further than this will allow you. So sometimes you have to do this to get it to look the way you want. In this case, it's pretty straightforward. It's either off or it's 100% on. There is no number beyond that. So I set it to where I'm pretty happy with it. Yeah, that's kind of cool. It looks a little modern, right? Because it's semi-transparent. So now it wipes on, but it's semi-transparent. I like that. Time to move on to the next layer. So the next layer is our little pink box. Well, let's move the box. Let's let it actually kind of fall into place. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, I'm going to change the position of this layer. So knowing that I have the pink box layer as what I'm on, then all these controls follow whatever track I'm on. See them changing up there? So I'm going to the pink one, and I'm going to say, okay, by about the time that the animation is done for the blue, I want the pink box to be done. So about the same time, that is when the pink box will be in this final position. So in a sense, this keyframe is already set for me. All I need to do is actually tell it, remember this moment. So I'm going to say, in relation to the position, let's set a keyframe, the first keyframe here. Now, when I go back to the beginning of my timeline of this animation, I could say, well, I want a second keyframe, but it's actually doing something. And we have X and Y controls here. X is left and right, Y is up and down, and we want this to drop in from above. So I'm going to drag it in whatever direction allows me to make the pink go up, and that looks like it's the right direction. And because I'm parked on a keyframe, it now says, okay, you want it to start up here. Now the only thing is I want this to start, I don't want it to just turn on and already be fully solid. I need this to fade on as it's dropping. So I have two keyframes set. The first one, it should be invisible. So I'm going to go to the opacity section, and I'm going to say, all right, I want to set a keyframe that is in the same moment that this keyframe I'm already sitting on is, and I'm going to set that first one there, and I want the opacity at that moment in time to be 0. So it's gone. And then during the time it takes to fall, right, which we can't see it now, right, because it's stuck with the opacity at 0, I can actually jump so that I go to the exact same moment in time. I can jump to that keyframe, and I can say, now I need a second keyframe. We say at this keyframe, I want it to be 100% solid. So I'll just turn it up. So now, not only does it fall, but it fades on as it falls, which is kind of nice. All right. The next layer is my name. Might be very simple. Maybe we just want it to fade up. If we want it to be in sync with the other fades that are happening, I can go and I can use that same trick, right? Go to one of these tracks that has some sort of keyframe on it, jump to the exact moment, and then jump to the other track and say that is my moment that it is fully solid. So I'm going to set a keyframe, and I always have to set the first one using this, right? Go back to the beginning, set the first one, turn it down so my name is gone, and then now it will fade up as everything comes into play. Might be nice to stagger it. Well, I don't want to stagger it right now because it's kind of a pain in the butt. I'm going to show you how to do that later. All right, how to do it later on after you have everything moving like you want. So my next track is my title. Well, what do you say we do the same cropping trick, right? We'll just sort of let it wipe on that title. So I'm going to grab that little crop thing, I'm going to drag it and put it over here on this. Now I have crop controls that I didn't have before. And I can go over here and I can basically say, okay, I want it to go from left to right. So I'm going to take the right hand control. I'm not going to undo this. I'm going to do it with the numbers because it's a little faster. And I'm going to say, yep, as of right there, it's completely wiped on. So I'm going to set my first keyframe there, which is not the first keyframe that will happen. It's the first keyframe I've set in my story of animation here. And then I can go back to the beginning of the timeline and say I need a second keyframe. And at that point, the crop is actually coming from completely off where you can't see the word anymore. So now it goes from completely off to on. Nice. All right, we got one more thing to move, right? Our line. So we're going to go to our line. There it is. All right, and we'll do the same thing just for the sake of balance. I'm going to use the same keyframe timing of everything at about a second. And so I jumped to a track that already had keyframes in it. I jumped to this moment in time. Now I'm going to go back and make that the layer I'm messing with. And I'm going to do a position trick with that as well. And this is the moment that the line should be in its final position. And since it's the first keyframe I've set for that variable, I'm going to hit the little stopwatch. And then I'm going to go back to the beginning of my animation, set a second keyframe, and then tell that keyframe, yeah, but at that point, you're actually going to be over here. And that's where it starts from. And then, of course, I probably, again, don't want it to pop on and then just start flying. I want it to actually fade up in sync with the move, right? So I'm going to say I need some opacity keyframe. So at this point, it should be fully solid. So I'm going to set my first opacity keyframe here. Sometimes it makes you do it twice. It's kind of weird. And then I'm going to jump back to the beginning of my animation, and I'm going to manually set 1 down here, and at that point it's totally gone. 0. Alright, so now when I play my animation, everything kind of happens at the same time. Not bad. A little mechanical. There's some things we can do to make this more elegant. The first thing we could do is say, well, why does it all have to happen in sync? I like knowing that all my movements are similar in time, length, just because it's easier to build and build it with some symmetry. But let's say I don't want to do that. Let's say I want my the pink thing to come in and then my name to start coming on, right? So this is my name layer. So I'm going to take this whole layer and I'm just going to nudge it over to the side. And then, just to be even more dramatic, I'm going to take my name identifier, my title, and I'm going to move it even later so it's even more dramatic. And then maybe the very last thing that happens is my line flies over. So what do we get now? We get these animating elements coming on at the same time. My name comes on, and then it wipes on my title, and the line is the last thing to land in place. Here it is, regular speed. Everything looks a little more dynamic just because I staggered them. All right, but I had to pick a time, so why not match them all? Because I might decide, oh, I do want them to match. You know, maybe I want the line and the pink to match. So if I take the white line and I have snapping on, I can have it perfectly align with the pink start, and then I will see that when I play it, the pink line and the white line hit at the same time, and then everything else does what it's going to do. And that's kind of a nice timing thing. It works out pretty well. All right. Kind of cool. Now, the last thing is everything does sort of come to a screeching halt. It just sort of goes, and it stops. All right. So what I could do is say, well, I want those keyframes to be smoother. So let's take our white line and let's go to the keyframe where it actually stops moving, right? Its position changes over to this. And if you right click on it, you are given the option to do a ease in. So ease in is ease into this moment in time. So if I do that, now when it plays, you will see that the line comes in a little smoother and then is much smoother when it stops. It eases to a stop. Okay? Now, if you couldn't see that, let's try something else. How about my pink line? So I'm going to go down to my pink little box, and I'm going to say, in terms of its position, let's ease it in as well. Ease in. So now the pink box should fall much more gracefully, and then comes to a nice smooth stop. All right, so that little trick, fixing the in and out. So out would mean, oh, I want something to start moving smoother. Then you could do that. So in a sense, if something was already on screen, it would give a slow acceleration up to full speed as opposed to just 0 to 60 in no time flat. All right, so that is another way to sort of smooth out what you're doing. And that is how to do an animated name key. Now, for reference, I'm going to show you an animated title that was done using mostly the same techniques. All right, so this is the gaudiest title, right, which I could have just faded in like this, but that's kind of boring. So I made all these layers, and this is what it does. Kind of cool. All right, but it's the same tricks. It's everything we just did. It's positioning. The only thing that's a little different is I did a little bit of a blur effect on the background, which you don't have to try and do that if you don't want to. But you get the basic idea. We have things flying into place and some wiping happening, and I used the same method. I built the whole thing, copied it, and then made changes to each track so that I could say, well, I want separate control. So if I turn off the original, I want separate control over the blue. I want separate control over yellow, separate control over the title, and under the subtitle. All right, so the assignment is do a title, something fancy like this over this, or a name key, but it needs to animate, and at least 4 things have to move or change to create the animation. There's 4 things, actually 5 if you count the blur, but if we discount the blur, this has 5 things running, or 4 things running in it. So you can do that, or you can do a name key, which is totally fine.